All right, how's everybody doing so far today? Last talk before lunch, blood sugar at an all-time low, prime speaking and learning opportunity, right? Right. So my name, as he said, is Quintessence. Q or Quinn is fine, whatever helps you feel comfortable. And I work at a company called Logs.io, and what we do is we basically provide Elk as a service with additional tooling that we've actually custom built on top of it to help you monitor your infrastructure and to help with alerting and other tools like that. And if you want to hear the whole spiel about the awesomeness of logs, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to hop right to and get into the point. So why do we hire people, right? And it seems like an obvious question. We have problems we need to solve. But when you think about what's actually going through your mind as you're trying to hire a person, there's more than just the quota that you've put up on your job rec on Indeed.whatever, right? You have, I may need a JavaScript person, I might need someone with an AWS cert, but when it comes time to do the interview, I'm actually doing social analysis, right? Will they work well in the team? Do they work well with others? Do they have leadership skills? These other sort of tangent skills, what do they bring to my team that my team either needs more of or completely lacks? In essence, what diversity are they bringing to my team? This is this kind of intentional diversity, right? Where we're looking at a candidate and saying, I see you as a person and I want what you're bringing to me, but currently, what's going on is we're actually trying to bolster more types of diversity in our workplaces. So it goes beyond just, are you a good leader? Do you have good social skills? And we want to see more people for the things that we haven't maybe got a good metric on, the unquantified. So do we want to know what someone's experience is like who is completely different from us, who is solving problems in a completely different way than our own headspace, just by virtue of the fact that they grew up somewhere else, speak a different language, speak multiple languages, or whoever and whatever else. So we're working really hard to bring all these new people in, but we don't necessarily know as a culture what that means or how we should do it or how we can protect the ideas or them as we bring them into the fold. Which goes all into serendipity, right? So I actually recently read a blog post by a Polish web developer. It was actually written in 2015. I guess I'm behind the times. But what he was writing about is he was actually a core contributor to Medium.com. For those unfamiliar, Medium is one of the many blogging platforms available today, and they received a question. And the question was, I cannot type an acute S with my standard Polish keyboard. And he thought, we don't do language parsing. It just seemed like an odd problem. But he was also Polish, and very quickly, just by watching his own typing patterns, he thought, I know what happened. We're protecting people from control saving, which is how some people type a diacritic S. And because of his experience, he was able to figure that out a lot faster than someone who's monolingually English, as we Americans tend to be, would be able to do. Now, when Medium brought him on, I very much doubt, even if they said, we want to break out into the European market, they said to themselves, I really hope that this guy can solve a problem that we don't even know we're going to have. Right? They probably brought him in because of the skills on the job rec and or the social factors that they were probably interviewing for. But as it so happens, he saved everybody a lot of time just by knowing how keyboards work. So as we're bringing these more diverse people into our workplaces, how do we ensure that we can keep bringing them in, that the workplaces are welcoming? This particular individual did have an advantage in the sense that he was a white male, so maybe diversity in a different aspect for him. But when we have people who are historically underrepresented, like women, persons of color, maybe immigrants in different countries where immigration is not as high as other countries and so on, we really need to find a way to help make sure that they are able to express and grow in the community. And this goes back into how we're changing what we're doing with diversity and how we're selecting diverse candidates and what that means. When we're talking about, what works for us, we have what works for us may not work for you, right? And in this way, diversity in its current incarnation, or what we're trying to do to diversify, and what we mean by that today, is very new, very fragile, right? So again, what do? We first have to acknowledge that life is a series of experiences, which probably seems obvious. But when you think about it, it's very difficult for me to understand you in terms of your whole life history up until the moment we meet. I don't know you that well. You don't know me that well. So I might present you with something maybe as an employer if I'm in a position to hire for a team I'm running, and I might think to myself, oh, why isn't this person, this young woman that I brought onto my team because she has this rock star resume, sharing her ideas in a meeting? Whereas she has just come from an employer where every idea she had, for whatever reason was invented at the time, was shut down. So now she has this habituated behavior. And so how do we meet and how do we connect the dots? And part of that is my mindset and my awareness. And let's just highlight that for a minute. My mindset with feeling. Mindset matters. So if I'm approaching this problem of the young woman I've hired who isn't sharing her ideas as a problem to me, I will address her, unintentionally perhaps, but I will address her in the headspace that I'm in. She is a problem to me, and so I will address her as a problem to me. If I decide to take a more empathetic approach and I say, you're not a problem to me, you are having a problem, that, to go to what an earlier speaker said, which I think she used an excellent inverted pyramid there, the servant manager, my job is to help you be able to express yourself to me and everyone else. So now I'm not seeing you as a problem, I'm seeing you as a person, and therefore the ideas I come up with to help you as that person will be very different than if I just see you as a problem or a person that needs to be fixed. So mindset. Let's take a shift. One way that we can do this, if we're looking for specific actionable items, which I think are incredibly important, because we talk a lot about diversity and what it means and all of that, but then people are like, great, what do I do, right? So actionable items. First actionable item, coach, don't rescue, right? So when you have the young woman and we're trying to coach her into speaking in the meeting, using the current example, you don't want to speak over her or for her, but if she has an idea, you can make sure it's been heard. Thank you for the idea. Offer some acknowledgement. Another way that rescuing can kind of appear in a pretty benign form is something that I even experienced when I was getting started as a junior programmer, right? Where I would ask a question, and the response of the person I was asking, who was usually male just by, the lay of the land, he would reach in and say, hey, let me do that for you. Nope. Because then I'm not learning and I'm not doing whatever I've just asked. Maybe for some reason my VPN connection isn't working, and I say, hey, have you seen this before? And he just fixes it. I now don't know what he knew to fix it. I don't know what tooling he used or what error message he saw or what he had in his head that now I don't have in mind, right? And yes, I can still ask, but that's what we talk about when we talk about these subtle barriers to entry, right? Where, I've seen my male colleagues offer information instead of offering assistance to use that parallel. Another thing to be aware of is this phrase that's been catching some steam, and I actually really like it, is that you're giving someone a hand up and not a handout. And since the best way to talk about this, in my opinion, is for me to just keep talking about myself, I'm going to tell you a really quick story about handing up and not out. One of the first networking connections I made in the local area where I'm from, which is Buffalo, New York, near Niagara Falls, for the curious, what he said to me when he decided to hire me and bring me on his team has actually stuck with me for several years. And he says, I'm hiring you on your potential. And he said, I want you to know and I want you to understand this as a young woman in tech, that it is very common for young women in tech to be hired on their existing skills and not their potential, but for the young men to be hired for their potential. And you need to be aware of this as you go out in your career. And I thought it was fantastic that I had found some random networking connection mentor that was able to tell me, one, why I was being hired, but also what I needed to be aware of, taking into account what I personally bring to the diversity coin. The fact that I'm a young woman, I might not have been aware that people were, paging into completely different criteria for not me people. How would I ever know that unless someone tells me? And it's important to make a note that when you're offering advice of this type and when you're extending yourself from a very human and empathetic way to another person, you're not letting them bypass to make a quota. Again, mindset. If you're seeing them as a quota, you're going to treat them like a quota. But if you see them as a person, you're going to offer them help. And it's a very empowering place to help them grow into your organization. Another thing to be aware of is that different people learn different ways. And I bring this up, even though it's obvious, but yet not. How many of us have been told to read the manual when we ask a question? I know there are more of you. You're lying to me because you want lunch. So when you ask your mentors, hey, I don't know how to do this command and bash. They're like, man command. Thanks. Either, and there might be another reason I'm asking. Maybe I find the manual entry to be hard to read. Maybe it's not as detailed as my mentor with greater experience than I. Maybe I need more information than I'm getting than it's providing for me. Or maybe I just don't learn that way. And while we're keying in on different things in diversity, it's important to remember that since everyone doesn't learn in the same way, just brushing people off and saying, read the manual, read the documentation, read the internal this, it doesn't actually help that person grow in your organization, and it certainly doesn't foster a bond of trust between you and this person that you're bringing in. This is something that we actually do, reciprocal mentorship, in an organization that I run the local chapter of in Buffalo, New York, called Girl Develop It. We help young women pursue careers in software. Now, reciprocal mentorship is this idea that I'm not the hero helping you, young developer, to come and launch off into space, right? The idea is that the person I'm bringing on also has their own things to offer. And again, by example, last year I met a young woman who wanted to become involved in GDI. And the way she did it was completely rock star. She messaged me, she found me first, messaged me, met me in person, in business casual attire, which as a software developer, I was like, where am I? And then she hands me a resume, which again, I'm like, where am I? And she starts talking to me about her experience running other organizations in her college, because she actually ran a women fitness club at the college she was attending at the time. And I thought to myself, oh, you know what our leadership team needs is a task manager, because as we've been growing out, we've been finding scaling really hard. And how many of you have run into an issue where you're growing your team and what worked great for 2 or 3 suddenly starts to feel painful at 4, 5, 10, right? So I'm thinking to myself, this girl is excellent. She just existed and showed me that she's excellent. But what she needed from me was to know, who's hiring in Buffalo? What are they hiring for? What skills do I need to develop? Who can I ask? Can I ask you? Well, me, right? And so this idea that it's actually bi-directional. I'm not just taking some young 20-something and launching her into the Buffalo hiring nucleus. I'm actually getting something out of the exchange as well. And this is something that's important for everyone to remember, like with junior employees. You want to make sure you're providing them with challenges. And you want to make sure to treat them with the idea that they already have stuff to bring. They weren't just, not to use the joke, but they weren't born yesterday, right? They have skills. They have things that they can bring to you that they can help you with that you might not expect. For example, who's the best person, or who do you think is the best person to train the next new hire? Is it the most senior person in your organization, or is it the most previous new hire? The person who just went through the process, who could probably stand to benefit from, one, revisiting the process for, really retaining that information, but also from the increased responsibility you just gave them. Reciprocal and challenging. Something else that I came across when I was researching this topic is the idea that you want to make sure that you're actually being proactive instead of passive. And this might be a little obvious and maybe not, but some of these things, they feel obvious, and then you go out into your workplace and you're like, why isn't this happening? So when you're talking about, proactive resilience, an example that someone gave me is, once a male director at this other company that she happened to work with used his political capital to argue in favor of making sure a female that she wanted to hire got the same pay as the male members of the team. And an unequal pay is still very much an issue for women. So the fact that someone was able to step in and be like, no, really though, we really need to have people on the same page getting paid the same amount for the same type of work in the same position. And this is something that was happening because he was proactive. He reached out to her and made sure that this was being met, as opposed to just accepting, well, women have unequal pay, so that's that. That's something that we can all do for each other, to be proactively helping, and that will build resilience within our organizations. Once diversity and once these different kinds of diversity and different people become normalized within our organizations, it's actually just going to be the company culture, and we won't be going through these awkward growing pains that we're going through now. Another thing that I noticed going through the junior to more senior levels of my career is this idea that when women are given feedback, I noticed a lot of the time we're given very social feedback. And when I would talk to my male coworkers about the types of feedback they would get in performance reviews, they were actually getting more actionable items. For example, I might be told to improve on, being more assertive or being more confident, and that would be the advice I was given. Whereas Joe developer might be given advice like, it'd be great is if you improved this skill. The company really needs to see more people who have business acumen or can predict things that would, I can see that we're doing really well in this area, and they get very actionable things to do. And then the men become confident. The idea that confidence just appears when you fake it till you make it, it only goes so far, right? Telling women, young women, adult women, anyone, to just be confident without giving them the knowledge and experience to build that confidence and to keep it there isn't actually going to help them out. Not in the long term. It'll actually help increase the gap, which is what we're actually trying not to do. As another point to all of that, you also want to be mindful of job titles. Something I noticed that came up a lot, at least where I'm from, is you'll see that slightly different job titles will attract more women than men, or more of different groups, persons of color, maybe Asian Americans or whatever, and they start to aggregate to certain job titles. But these job titles, even though they might have a great deal of overlap for what they're actually requiring you to do and from a technical perspective, can have very different pay grades. So as a mentor, I might say, hey, newbie, I know this about our employing pattern in the area. Be aware that when you're looking to do this type of QA position, you can also search for the following job titles. And you can max out how much you're making or who you're working for just by knowing what type of job title you have. And the reason I always make sure to tell my young mentees this is because I noticed my employers would always say job titles don't matter. That was less than helpful, because they actually do. Going back to onboarding, you need to make sure that there's actually an onboarding process when you're bringing people into your organization. When you have explicit onboarding, which is to say, I have list of things that I want all my new hires to accomplish, you're not relying on the social structure of the business. So if you have more of an implicit model, what can end up happening is, because you're trying to diversify the social structure of your business, that very social structure in its current form is going to work against you. If you have a team of developers that are mostly 25 and you bring on a 35-year-old who has a family, he or she might not be able to socialize with the younger 25-year-olds in the same way, but that very socialization without explicit onboarding is what they're going to absolutely need in order to get things accomplished in that company. It also doesn't, it prevents the process I mentioned earlier where you have the last new hire training the next new hire, because then you can iteratively improve your onboarding process as things need to be added or removed as they need to be added and removed, instead of finding out, months later that, oh, we're not doing it that way anymore. Great. For those who are looking to intentionally mentor instead of maybe just working with, your colleagues at work, I actually was thinking about it in terms of what I called the hiring nucleus and what I've heard other people call similar. And the idea is that you need to kind of know the beat of how the companies in your area are behaving. And this isn't just, I know who's hiring JavaScript, I know who's hiring for Google Compute, for infrastructure or anything. You also want to know kind of about the company health. And this goes to, especially if you're looking to bring in diversity, when you're trying to fix a diversity problem and you know that a lot of people from different backgrounds who aren't, young white men are leaving the industry, what you want to do is you don't want to make their first experience a terrible one if you can help it. And part of that is being aware of what's going on in your area and your companies. And another thing that you can do is help encourage people when they find themselves in a company that maybe has a toxic company culture to just leave and find a better one. I mean, I know, as all things aside with, Elasticsearch being awesome, one of the things I love most about where I work now is just the absolute positivity in the working environment that I've had. I have never seen that in all of the US-based companies that I've worked. It's a very different cultural attitude working with this company. Logs.io happened to be founded in Tel Aviv, but the Israelis that I'm working with, there is just so much positivity. Did you try this? Even when I was coming here, this is my second public speaking engagement. Do you need anything? Do you have how do you feel about your slides? Did you want to do a practice run? They're reaching out to me. We have a 7-hour time difference because they want to make sure that I'm successful, because that makes us all successful. Whereas other companies I've worked at, it was kind of more siloed. You're just kind of sent out into the world, let us know if you need anything, bye. And just being able to foster that is really important. And just kind of heading up the tail with that, I want to take a moment to talk about someone local to Buffalo. His name was Charlie Wirtz. And he was actually one of the first contacts I made in Buffalo. And one of the ways he did that was jump-starting what we in Buffalo call the Buffalo Open Coffee Club. And it was for software companies and newbies and college students and anyone looking to make a career change to actually mingle in a way that was not organic or would not have other ways have been organic. Because there's no way that you can easily meet these people outside of hiring fairs or whatever. And because he would do this, and he also would run the TED Talks in Buffalo and do all of these other amazing things, he was actually able to help, Girl Develop It and a bunch of women, including myself, break out and from a positive way and in a way of empowerment into the developer community. And as a result, I was able to take on a series of jobs, including a database admin, DevOps engineer, infrastructure engineer, pick your buzzword, and that led me to be able to be in front of you today. And it's all because he jump-started this process in Buffalo, because he saw that there was a gap that needed to be filled for the employers to meet potential employees. For those of you going full into your glucose comas, if you want to take some additional resources, and I can post these in the channel that Jason mentioned as well, if you want to do some initial reading, as well as if you want to see what kind of biases you might already have. I had a fun time playing around with the implicit bias test at Harvard University, where you're basically picking some of their things to see if you have inherent biases that maybe you're unaware of. And that just helps you walk through that. The career advice, I definitely recommend watching, because it actually talks about, if you want to take 15 minutes and learn about some of the ways that young women in your organization struggle to get that next step into senior management instead of dropping out. She actually covers that far better than I could without devoting a whole talk to it, so I definitely do recommend that in particular. And I just want to take a moment and breathe and ask if you have any questions yet, because I know we're approaching the end. It's going to be lunchtime. Yes. Yeah. So the question was, when you have an existing team that maybe is already 25 developers and you're looking to bring more diversity in without breaking the company culture, how do you go ahead and do that? And part of that, there are a couple of things you can do. First is to take a look at the company culture and maybe get some feedback. For example, if you're going to start interviewing and if you make it known that you're taking seriously minority candidates from a variety of backgrounds, when you bring them in, you can always ask for their feedback at first, especially if you have, like you said, a monolithic culture, because you might not know how to best reach these other people in your area. And if they say, oh, well, it would have been easier for me if, and that would require you to kind of build this bi-directional exchange with them. Now, in terms of once it's brought on, I think one of the things to remember is with mindset shifting, you have to flex. So you have this monolithic culture, but you don't really want to preserve that if you're looking to diversify. You want to preserve some of it, but the whole point of bringing in the diversity is that you're going to be changing it up. And the thing that you want to, as like a manager or a person in position of influence, is to say, hey, this is good. Everything's fine. We want everything to be good. We want these skills. We want these ideas. We want these different mindsets. Instead of it feeling like a threatening thing, use it to empower the existing employees as well and say, now we can have someone who can help you do X, Y, Z, and we didn't have that before. Does that cover? Okay. No problem. Do we have any others? Yes. So the question was, do I have tips for basically a series of rules that can be followed to bring in juniors from any background? And the only really static rule that you can have is to flex, which sounds like a cop-out, I know. But when you think about it, just for the reasons you started to talk through as you were asking the question, you have someone like, I live in the United States. I live in Buffalo. We're pretty landlocked in the U.S., really. We have 2 border nations. That's it. So when we bring and what we think of as diverse is maybe not what somebody in a nation that has 5 border nations, everybody speaks a different language, and oh, by the way, there are 3 national languages, and most people are trilingual anyway. It's a very different experience. And so I wouldn't be doing the same things that maybe you would be doing. But the important thing is to say, if this doesn't work, try again. Iterate. Right? So I know that maybe isn't as strict as you want, but if you come at it with a mindset of this is a human problem I'm looking to solve, and you shift your mindset, doing some of the things that I talked about coaching and reciprocal mentoring, I think that will actually go a long way without stressing about the finer level details of each step. Any other questions? I don't think so. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.